Good evening. Coming up tonight on The Rundown, the Ukraine is continuing to get more and more tense. We will have discussions on that with WTOP political analyst Christopher Lewin. Also, CPAC, the popular Republican convention, was this week. Victoria Diana, WTOP's reporter Victoria Diana, was at CPAC. She will be joining us tonight through phone conversation. Stay with us. You're watching The Rundown. Good evening and welcome to The Rundown. I'm Megan Roberts. The crisis in the Ukraine took a decidedly military flavor Friday as tensions flared between Moscow and Kiev over control of Crimea, even as the world's diplomats said conflict could be avoided. Crimea, a self-governing peninsula in southern Ukraine with an ethnic Russian majority and strong cultural ties to Russia, has become the epicenter of a battle for influence between Moscow, Kiev, and the West since Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was pushed out of office by protesters who were angered by his rebuff of a trade deal with the European Union in favor with Russia. In the days since Yanukovych was ousted, thousands of Russian troops have surrounded military bases and key infrastructure sites as they have taken control of border crossings. At the same time, a political battle has been playing out between the two countries, with Russia's parliament on Friday giving its defiant support to Crimean lawmakers who want to see their region split from Ukraine and join Russia. Well, the crisis in the Ukraine has captured the attention of the world. The Ukraine and other Eastern European countries like Poland are asking for the UN to come and observe the situation in the Crimean Peninsula. For a second day, international monitors trying to get into the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea were stopped. Masked men carrying rifles blocked the group of unarmed Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe observers at a checkpoint. CNN's Matthew Chance was with them as they were turned away.
On the road to the center of the Ukrainian crisis, as international monitors sent to report on the military build-up here tried to make their way to Crimea. We gained exclusive access to their convoy as it crossed from the mainland. Right, well, we're following these coaches here which are carrying the 43 members of the unarmed OSCE military mission towards Crimea. The last time they tried to get into the peninsula, they had a very hostile reception. One of the military officers on board there told me that the guards, the pro-Russian guards at the checkpoint they tried to cross, clicked their safety catches off, and so it was a very dangerous situation they were in. Earlier, when we were speaking to them as they got onto these buses, they told us that they've had a meeting and that they've decided they do have the right to access Crimea. And so today, they say, they're going to be much more assertive about getting in. But these unarmed military officers can only push so far, especially when confronted with the masked pro-Russian gunmen manning the roadblocks. The negotiations were short, access denied. Legally, are they allowed to prevent you from going in?
Legally, it's quite an interesting question. We have the right to go there, but as you could see, they not allow us.
It was at the invitation of Ukraine's interim government that the OSCE, a key European security organisation, arrived. At least 18 member states, including the US, sent military observers meant to monitor the crisis and help de-escalate it, not make it worse. Well, this is the standoff we've been witnessing between members of the OSCE here and the pro-Russian security forces there that are blocking our path through this stretch of land towards the Crimean Peninsula. The OSCE commander here saying that we've come here to check on the situation inside Crimea, and the man there wearing the balaclava, the mask, has just told them that he's been ordered by the Crimean government not to let anybody in. You can see this is the reaction of the Ukrainian crowd chanting now nationalistic slogans because they're angry at what's happened.
Angry
and frustrated that for those who now control Crimea, an international presence is not welcome. Matthew Chance, CNN, at the Chagor Crossing, Ukraine.
Congressman Ed Royce of California spoke to CNN's Jake Tapper Wednesday about using petroleum as a way to fight Putin. Russia is Europe's main supplier of petroleum and makes up 70% of Moscow's revenue. Royce said that if the United States were able to supply Europe with an energy source, it would be devastating to Moscow's economy and would definitely send a message to Vladimir Putin. And the Black Sea has been an area of great tension throughout the issues with the Ukraine. The Crimean Peninsula is important to Russia because it is Russia's only access to the Black Sea. This week, a second U.S. Navy destroyer made its way in through the Bosphorus Strait toward the Black Sea. The guided missile destroyer is due to take part in exercises with allied navies from Romania and Bulgaria. The U.S. Navy says this is a scheduled deployment that is unrelated to the Ukraine crisis. It becomes the second U.S. Navy warship currently in the Black Sea. CNN senior correspondent Ivan Watson reports on how this is affecting the tensions in the Ukraine.
Normally, Istanbul's Bosphorus Strait is a vital transit route for commercial shipping. It's also popular for tourists as well. But over the course of this week, it's become an important transit route for warships. On Tuesday, 2 Russian Navy warships followed hours later by a Ukrainian naval frigate steaming through here on their way to the Black Sea. And on Friday, the U.S. guided missile destroyer, the USS Truxtun, also sailed up this route to the Black Sea. Now, the U.S. Navy says its ship arrived for a previously scheduled journey to engage in joint naval activities, exercises with Bulgaria and Romania, 2 Black Sea countries. But we know that the situation in the Black Sea is anything but normal right now, with the Russian military occupation of the Crimean Peninsula, which sticks out into the Black Sea. And this geopolitical crisis has a very important naval dimension to it, as the Crimean Peninsula is the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. And we also know that the Russian military appears to be blockading several Ukrainian naval vessels in their own ports in the Crimea, actually scuttling several ships to prevent Ukrainian naval ships from escaping from there. So the symbolism of the U.S. Navy destroyer's arrival is important at this time, particularly during a week when the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, has announced that the U.S. would step up joint air patrols in the Baltic Peninsula, basically a show of support and force in support of U.S. allies in Eastern Europe, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, as well as Poland, all former Soviet satellites, all very concerned about the Russian military advances into the Ukraine. Ivan Watson, CNN, reporting from Istanbul's Bosphorus Strait.
And back in Ukraine, both pro and anti-Russia factions held rallies in the city of Simferopol today. The pictures you see here are from the pro-Ukraine demonstrations. Hostilities are intensifying in the region, with Ukrainian officials accusing pro-Russian forces of armed aggression. Those forces are in control of the Crimean Peninsula now for all intents and purposes, but the Ukrainian interim prime minister is set to fly to the United States this week to discuss the crisis in Crimea. He will meet with U.S. President Barack Obama on Wednesday. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue our discussion on the Ukraine. Stay with us. You're watching The Rundown.
So, me and the guys, we like to loosen up a little bit.
Blue 42, hike!
Every now and then, Dan likes to take it a little too far. But hey, the show's all about competition, so we'll take it.
Stupid Dan with stupid football and stupid running.
It's easy to tell if you've had way too many. But what if you've had just one too many? Buzz driving is drunk driving.
I see you. Yeah, I see you over there.
Honey? The credit fairy doesn't exist.
What?
It's make-believe. Nobody left anything under your pillow.
If there's no credit fairy, then we'll make our credit score go up.
We would. Doing things like paying our bills on time.
There's no magic to improving your credit, but there's help, and it's free. Go to creditfairy.org.
What?
Good evening and welcome back. Russian lawmakers are defying the threat of sanctions and breaking Crimea's upcoming vote on whether to secede from Ukraine and join Russia. A public referendum on the territorial split is scheduled for 7 days from now, but Ukraine's interim prime minister says Crimea is and will always be a part of his country. The Pentagon says U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel has contacted Ukraine and directly expressed his support.
Secretary Hagel reached out by phone this morning with his Ukrainian counterpart, Minister of Defense Ihor Tenyuk. This was the first time that the two had chatted, and Secretary Hagel congratulated Minister Tenyuk on assuming his new post. The Secretary also stressed the firm commitment of the United States to support the Ukrainian people and to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. He praised the performance and the restraint of the Ukrainian armed forces who have not allowed the situation to escalate. Finally, he committed himself to keeping the dialogue open with Minister Tenyuk throughout these difficult times.
Well, joining me tonight to discuss the ongoing tensions in the Ukraine is WTOP political analyst Chris Lewin. Chris, thanks for joining me tonight.
No problem, May.
So first of all, I just want to get your reactions to everything that you've been seeing. I think that this has mostly come to a head since the Olympics. After the Olympics died down, all the attention moved over to the Ukraine. So what have you been seeing, and what has your reaction been for the last month of watching this?
What we're seeing is Russia just trying to, expand a little bit more. It's kind of going back all the way to the Cold War days of the old Soviet Union and the areas that they're disputing right now between the Ukraine and Russia. And it all goes back, and if pretty much you're just looking at the history books, it's the same fight that we've been seeing for a while now. But you did say it perfectly, May. The Olympics did kind of cast this shadow where everyone was paying attention off to the sides and all the problems that were happening in Sochi and the fact that there was no terrorist attack during the Olympic Games. People were kind of distracted over in Russia. So this came to a head afterwards because, Russia just kind of trying to exert their dominance in the area too, which they have been for a while. Vladimir Putin always trying to exert his dominance. And I think that the attention was on him, so might as well just try and make a big move while the attention was on him.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin made the decision to stay out of what was happening in the Ukraine? This has been going on since November.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that he made the decision to not get involved until the Olympics were over?
I think there's a few factors that I made that decision for him. I think after the Olympic Games, like I just said, there was just so much focus on Russia, so much tension had already built up since November that I think that was the time where he just decided to go in there. But there were a lot of factors that really just made that decision as to why he decided now in March or February, March to make that decision to go in. And I just think it just so happened to contribute right around the same time as the Olympics.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin has, speaking of factors, as to why he would go in, do you think that Russia holds any serious and legitimate interest as to what they're doing? We're seeing, they're kind of being portrayed as the bad guys right now, but is there something we're not seeing here and that we're not acknowledging that we should be looking at, that they do have legitimate interests in the Ukraine that would maybe justify their actions? Do you think there's anything to justify their actions?
Well, the area in question is home to a lot of people who have Russian descent. Russian moved over there or former part of that Soviet Union. So it does have that Russian history to it. So if you are looking at it from the side of Russia, that would be their reasoning behind it, is that it was people who associate themselves, are pro-Russian, a lot of them live in that area too. So I think that would be on their side as to why. But of course, there are a lot of factors as to why the Ukraine would want to defend that area and not let Russia take over.
A lot of people have been relating this back to the Cold War and discussing old Cold War tensions. Do you really think that the Cold War really is playing a role into this at all. I mean, Ukraine used to be a territory of Russia during the time of the Soviet Union. They are now their own country. And that was a very tense situation. And once they were in the 90s, when the Soviet Union broke apart, when Ukraine became their own nation. So do you think that there are really significant lingering Cold War ideas and tensions that are causing even more of a problem in this situation?
I think, of course, because, and like I said, if history always repeats itself, and in the situation we're seeing right now, you talked about how there's tensions in the 90s. Those tensions kind of seem to simmer down, but then once again, you get to these minor territorial disputes, and it blows back up. And in Russia, it's an area which people always talk about it being a hotbed of controversy, stuff happening in the country. And right now, we're just seeing them wanting to go back because they held a lot of power back in the days of the Soviet Union before the Soviet Union fell. And there are still a lot of Russians in the country. You have to think that was only 25 years ago, right around 25 years ago when the Soviet Union fell. There's still a lot of people who want that ability of Russia to be the top superpower again, to be up there. And I think that's the reason why they want to exert their dominance, is because there's still that big mindset of the Cold War.
Yeah, and let's take a look at what's happening on the other side of the world with the Western powers really becoming essential into this whole discussion of what's going to happen with Ukraine. President Obama is, of course, a key figure in this. How do you think his leadership has been so far in this debate and in this ongoing situation?
Honestly, I like the fact that he is he's made comments on it and defended the Ukraine, but hasn't done anything drastic at this point. I think right now there's a territorial dispute between the Ukraine and Russia, and I don't think the United States really needs to get overly involved in the situation. We've seen in the past when the U.S. tries to get involved in situations that haven't really escalated, and it just makes the United States look bad. So I think it's good for the United States to at least set a precedent, say that they're on the Ukrainian side of this issue, talk about it, tell Putin to back off. At the same time, I kind of like the fact, too, that they are not overexerting themselves.
Do you think that these sanctions that they're trying to in place are really going to change Vladimir Putin's mind as to what he has planned?
I really don't think so. I think once Vladimir Putin puts his mind to something that he is all for, then I don't think sanctions. I mean, Russia is still a big superpower in this country, or in this world, and I don't think that the sanctions against them will hurt too much.
All right, well, this is going to be an ongoing situation for months to come, so we will be, of course, continuing to follow this, but we're going to take a quick break here on The Rundown. Stay with us.
Answer me? I can't. My parents say I have to be home right after work.
So, and then you'll be back on.
That's so gay. Totally gay.
Oh, that's so Emma and Julia.
Why are you saying that's so Emma and Julia?
Well, you know, when something is dumb or stupid, you say that's so Emma and Julia.
Who says that?
Everyone. Imagine if who you are were used as an insult. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
Every year, mothers lose their babies to gun crimes. You'll always be your mother's baby. So before you commit a gun crime, think about who you'll leave behind. Gun crimes hit home.
Good evening and welcome back to The Rundown. The U.S. job market got a boost in February. According to the U.S. Labor Department, employers added 175,000 jobs. That's up from 129,000 in January. The strongest hiring came from professional and business service industries, which include accountants, architects, and technology workers. But as the labor force grew, so did the number of unemployed. The nation's unemployment rate rose slightly to 6.7%, up from 6.6% in January. Alabama legislators passed several restrictive abortion bills this week, including one that could mean felony charges against any doctor performing such a procedure on a woman who'd been pregnant for as little as 6 weeks. The 4 measures easily passed the state's House of Representatives on Tuesday, and they still need to go through the Senate and be signed by Governor Robert Bentley to become law. However, even if the bill completely passes, it is sure to face major obstacles in the courts. This isn't the first time Alabama legislators have passed a restrictive abortion law that's brought opposition and possible interference from the courts. Last July, U.S. District Judge Myron H. Thompson delayed the enforcement of Alabama's new abortion law. We are going to take a quick break here on the Rundown, and when we come back, we will take a look at CPAC that was happening this week. Stay with us.
Teenage friend Rachel, she's cool.
Hey. Hey, could you watch the road?
Hey, could you watch the road?
Okay. All right, well, if we die in a car crash, I want to donate my eyes to my neighbor, Gary. He has a boat, and he sails all around the world. I would love to see that. I don't know if he actually needs eyes, but who would turn on a free pair of eyes, right? Who's that rich?
Learn your lesson.
Hey guys, this is my teenage friend Fred.
Rad! Hey pal, you want to pay attention to the road?
Relax, man, I got it.
Look, my man, if your bad driving gets me killed, you better hope you die too, or I will haunt you silly. And I'm not just gonna float over your bed like, woo! I'm gonna be making a more annoying noise, like, ah! And instead of wearing those long white robes, I think I'll wear something more form-fitting and upsetting. The other ghosts will look and be like, wow, we've never seen that before.
Good evening and welcome back. The crisis in Crimea is revealing fault lines beyond Ukraine. Even here in Washington at the annual conservative conference CPAC, Republican leaders argued for conflicting views on foreign policy, with many of the party's 2016 hopefuls fighting to push the party in different directions. CNN's chief congressional correspondent Dana Bash reports.
Андрія Шикуна та Анатолія Ковальського під контролем. За кордоном вже знають цю ситуацію. Наш офіс і вони, ми вже...
Well, joining me tonight is WTOP reporter Victoria Diana, who was at CPAC. Victoria, how are you? Victoria, can you hear us? Okay, well, we can't get Victoria right now. We will get her later on in the show. But right now, we are also joined once again by WTOP political analyst Chris Lewin. Chris, thank you for joining me.
No problem. Again.
So as you were following CPAC this week, what stood out to you?
I think it was just the attacks of President Obama's leadership, especially when it comes to foreign policy that we've seen over the last week. I saw Rand Paul with his whole Liberty speech talking about the lack of leadership, towards liberty from the Obama administration. I think that's what really stood out for me, was just the constant nature, and of course, and you had to predict that was going to happen. Going against the 2016 hopefuls, going against the president, going against his foreign policy. I think that real shift towards, and from Obamacare a few months ago to now, that huge shift on weak foreign policy, that's what they're looking to attack now.
They were absolutely covering a bunch of different topics here, but specifically what was happening in the Ukraine. So we do have WTOP reporter Victoria Diana now. Victoria, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm on my way back from CPAC.
Victoria, what was your reactions to what you saw? I mean, being there at CPAC, how was that?
Yeah, it was great. I saw a good amount of speakers. Most of them kind of set out the same Republican platform and weren't that interesting, but a couple that I saw were really good.
What were some things that stood out to you?
What stood out the most for me, he didn't just list off the Republican platform, the same whole spiel with, pro-life and tighten the borders and Mexicans are going to take our jobs. It was a good speech. He talked about the NSA surveillance. He mostly talked about our constitutional rights, and that's his main focus. And so I think his speech was refreshing.
Victoria, I was able to follow really in depth the Chris Christie speech, which got a lot of mixed reactions from people who were there. Of course, he is a more moderate Republican, and last year he wasn't even invited to CPAC. So what were your reactions to what he had to say?
Oh, at first I was really excited to see Chris Christie. I'm a big fan. I was frankly quite disappointed with his speech. He is usually moderate, but in his speech he kind of went off on a whole pro-life spiel, and his speech was very to the right, and I'm surprised. I'm kind of worried because he is usually very moderate, and he might be doing something that Mitt Romney did, where he started off moderate and then went to the right for the primary campaign.
And Victoria, this was to highlight some people that they are thinking that will be their front runners for the 2016 presidential elections. Did anybody stand out to you that you think will be absolutely on the ballot to run?
It's hard to tell right now, honestly. Chris Christie might be. I know everybody's talking about him running. I would like to see Rand Paul. He won the straw poll at CPAC that they hold every year. And Rand Paul definitely is a fan amongst the younger people. I would like to see him go. Other people that has been brought up has been Ben Carson, Marco Rubio. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up running.
And Victoria, what was the crowd like being there? What was the atmosphere like in there?
For Rand Paul, it was pretty fun. It was all young people. People started chanting "Stand for Rand." For other crowds, it was kind of hit and miss. But there was a surprisingly amount. It was my first time. There was a surprisingly amount of young people there, a lot of students, and that was really fun.
All right, Victoria. Well, I want to thank you. Thank you for calling in and joining us tonight. Drive safe and get back to Oswego safely.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for talking.
So, Chris, after hearing from Victoria, she says all the speeches were really good. The atmosphere was very, very energetic. What were some things that you took away from it? I'm going to pose the same question to you. They're looking at 2016 hopefuls. Who stood out to you?
Well, I think, and you said it also when you were talking to Victoria, was that they allowed a guy like Chris Christie, a more moderate conservative, to come onto the stage and talk, somebody who wasn't invited last year. So now they're turning more to that moderate side. You saw Rand Paul also having the big speech at the convention. So I think it's guys like that, Rand Paul, Chris Christie, are going to be the two front runners that you're going to see. But I think there's also a lot of energy because it's people with like-minded ideas in one area. It's going to build up a lot of momentum for it, and I think it was good for the Conservatives to really just get those guys out there.
All right, well, it's going to definitely be interesting to see who will be on the ballot for the Republican Party. Chris, thank you for joining us. That's going to do it for us here tonight. On behalf of everyone at WTOP, I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.